I brought in some of the elements that had been in the UK stories. You know, we got Galvatron in there, we've got Unicron going, we put our origin. In the UK comic we came up with our origin that was different from the cartoon show. You know, I was never kind of keen on the idea that the Quintessence were the creators of the Transformers. It didn't work for me quite. So we came up with this big story of Primus and Unicron and gods and everything else, and we put that in the UK comic and then moved it over into the US comics. So it was great in a way. We got to kind of tidy up everything at the end into one reasonably comfortable continuity.
If I move back a while, you mentioned that Bob Budiansky was under pressure to introduce these characters all the time, some 10 new characters every 5 issues or so. Did you have any pressure by either Hasbro US or Hasbro UK to introduce characters in the UK comic?
Yeah, from time to time we did. From time to time, Hasbro UK, because they had a specific toy launch, would ask us to have those specific characters. The first time this happened was with Special Teams. When Special Teams came out, you know, the promotion was timed for a certain week, so we had to bring in a story for the Special Teams. But because of the problems with reprinting the Marvel comics, we were very early. You know, it was going to be another maybe 30 issues until the Special Teams came in chronologically. So suddenly we had to bring in the Special Teams ahead of time. So we came up with a story called Second Generation, in which Buster, because he's shared Optimus Prime's mind, has a vision of the future. And so we literally had a kind of flash forward to the Special Teams. And that was the way we got around the problem. And, you know, it's often the way it happened again with Headmasters. Actually, the new leaders, Galvatron and Ultra Magnus, was perfect. You know, that was our own story. But again, with Headmasters, we had to do a slightly out of the flow of normal time story to get them into the UK comic, but it wasn't often.
And then by the time you started writing for the American comic, was there still the pressure from Hasbro to introduce these characters? You did seem to have more freedom.
Yeah, there was much more freedom. I think, you know, by the time I came on the comic, it was 1989 maybe, 1989, and I don't think by then Hasbro were paying quite as much attention to Transformers. Their attention had probably turned more to other things, and you know, I mean, it had a good life for a toy tie-in. It was, you know, 4 or 5 years worth, and I think Hasbro assumed it was winding down, so they were less. You know, I think we had to introduce a bunch of Micromasters, and you know, maybe a few Action Masters, but really there was almost no pressure of getting characters in. So we had much more freedom just to tell which stories we wanted, with which characters we wanted. And the fact that we were bringing in Galvatron, and I've got no idea why I never put Ultra Magnus in it. You know, I mean, now I look back and think, well, why didn't I? You know, I had sort of the perfect opportunity to put him in. But you know, I didn't, but we brought Galvatron in, and no, I mean, largely Hasbro let us get on with it at that point. And in fact, there's a little story, a little anecdote from that time, where the editor on the time was a guy called Rob Tokar, really nice guy, and I got on with him really well, and he let me do an April Fool's joke. We decided to find out whether Hasbro were paying very much attention at all to the story outlines we were sending through to them. So I suggested to Rob, and Rob thought this was a great idea, and maybe regretted it later, that we would come up with the most ridiculous story we could put down on a couple of pieces of A4. And we had, you know, I think there were giant nuns, there was Galvatron squashing, you know, sort of pedestrians, there were prams rolling down hills, there was just about everything you shouldn't do in a Transformers comic we put into these 2 or 3 pages of story outline. And the whole thing ends up with, you know, all the characters pretty much destroyed. In one of the little scenarios we had running, Cup, or in fact lots of Autobots are chasing this mechanical sheep around the Ark. And the mechanical sheep is a Decepticon sort of Trojan horse, if you like, and it's packed with explosives. And because all these transformers have been up in the ark for so long, they're a little isolated, a little sort of, the sheep looks attractive to them. And of course, when one catches it, which is Cup, I think, that's the trigger to blow the whole ark up. And so all this was going, we just put everything in, and we sent it off to Hasbro on the 1st of April, you know, with a memo clearly dated 1st of the 4th, or 4/1, as it's the American way round. It was 4/1/90. And we sent it off, and there were 2 guys there, Vinny and another guy, I can't remember his name. And we, you know, and Rob actually by now was starting to think, have I just sort of torpedoed my whole career here? Especially as the days went by and there was no response from Hasbro. And so in the end, Rob sort of said, well, I better bite the bullet. And he phoned Vinny. And the other little sort of thing was the next issue, we did 1 issue with all this rubbish in it, and the next issue said, oops, we killed everyone. And so, you know, so this had gone off, and so Rob said to Vinny, well, so Vinny, did you get the latest story outline? And there's a sort of silence on the phone, and Rob can just feel, you know, sort of that something terrible is about to happen, and finally Vinny sort of turns around and says, yeah, we've got 1 or 2 concerns. What? And their main concern was that we don't quite see what's going to happen in the next issue because everyone's dead. And then so Rob had to really sort of hammer home the date on the memo before the sort of the penny dropped. And then there's another awful silence on the phone line. And then Vinny's like, oh, you guys! Oh, you crazy guys! And, you know, and then he said, does the other guy, you know, Hasbro, does he know about this? And Rob's going, well, I don't know, does he? And he goes, no, great, we're going to do it on him. So Hasbro ended up getting in on the joke, but I think both Rob and I regretted this. But yeah, I mean, I think by then, generally, you know, they weren't sort of paying too much attention.